Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rotoworld Football Show. I am Patrick Daugherty, joined today by Kyle Dvorchak and our newest employee, Patrick Kerrane. It's been going for a while. How are you doing?
Is that how it works? If you leave too long, you get back and you lose seniority?
We've been trying to tell that to Denny every time he leaves. Yeah. Hey, but you're back of the line.
You've lost seniority. You have to go back through the onboarding process again.
I actually probably should. I can't sign on to anything.
Yeah, what's going on with you? Need to change your password.
I think I need to reset all my passwords.
Yeah, you really need to. We're very high on cybersecurity here at NBC University. You got to change your password.
You leave the country, you got to change all your passwords. That's how it works.
So you left the country. Have you come back, like a changed man? I know some people go on like diving trips and they come back as like changed humans because they've seen the world from an entirely different perspective. You're halfway around the world. You're in the deep blue sea. Have you been profoundly changed?
Yeah. What you don't realize is once you get under the water, it's a whole new world down there, Pat. A whole new world. No, I don't think I've been profoundly changed, but I would recommend scuba diving. On ship chasing last night, I talked about some of the more harrowing aspects of scuba diving. When you're starting to feel a little panicky and you're 100 feet underwater, can get a little bit nerve-wracking, but the overall experience was incredible. We were in this like tiny little not tiny, it's quite a large area actually, but it's hard to get to. So there's these tiny little islands, but there's a bunch of them, and you're kind of we were living on a boat and getting to have access to these dive sites that are quite hard to reach by any other means, and seeing manta rays and sharks and octopus and all these crazy creatures down there. There's a bunch of like weird fish that aren't available or don't live anywhere else in the world than that part of Indonesia. So you're just diving like 4 times a day, not really doing anything else. It's like eat, sleep, dive type of thing. I think we spent 35 hours in the water.
Do you go deep enough that you have to slowly work your way back up to depth? Because I know like the pressure differential changes so much that if you go deep enough, you have to come back up slowly. You can't go right back up, or you'll.
That's pretty much any dive. Yeah.
Really?
Unless you're doing like a dive where your max depth is like maybe 30 feet, which would be a quite shallow dive, then you need to do that pretty much every single dive. And then you always basically you stop at around 15 feet for like 3 to 5 minutes. It's called a safety stop. You just chill there for a while because you're kind of like you take on nitrogen in your blood when you're diving, and so you essentially become like a Coke can. And so you don't want to. So the idea is like you now need to go to the surface and sort of like slowly, like when you crack the Coke can, you let it out all slow. You don't want to shake yourself up and then burst to the surface, or you will.
The first guy to learn that.
Get something called the bends.
Shout out to that guy.
Kerrane, because you were telling us before the show that you're ill. You consider maybe instead of COVID or the flu that you have the bends.
I don't think I have the bends. Slightly different symptoms involving joint pain and embolisms.
Yeah, so you can probably rule that one out.
Probably rule it out.
And I swear I wasn't going to make any underdog jokes, but so you take home one big contest and suddenly you're living on a boat in international waters trying to avoid I don't know what kind of tax laws, but we will find you.
I have a very poor understanding of tax law because here I am once again in New York City.
You're back in New York.
It doesn't seem like the best way to handle it.
Yeah, I hear you were told that. And too, you probably weren't hiding from the taxes. You may have been hiding from the blurbs. But Monday,
I won't deny that.
You're back next Monday, so get ready.
Enjoy your reserve/futures contracts, bud.
Yeah, no, those are all already done. We did those while he was gone. So yeah, I hope you're ready for the blurbs. Some of them will be about coaches. Coaching cycle is just about wrapped up. After interviewing just about every assistant coach in the entire league, the Colts have seemingly backed into a good hire in Eagles offensive coordinator Shane Steichen. Is that how we say it, Kyle? How do you pronounce his last name? Steichen. The same is not necessarily true of the Cardinals, who hired Steichen's former counterpart, Jonathan Gannon, coming off a very rough Super Bowl performance. It was, of course, an overall very good year for Jonathan Gannon's Eagles defense. How do we feel about these hires and the going forward directions of both these teams? Start with you, Kyle. You've been locked into the coaching cycle, probably about as good as anyone in the entire industry.
Probably. I don't want to pile on Gannon too much for what is like, no doubt, not a great showing in the Super Bowl. The defense that had been, and this is why I don't want to pile on too much, had been like one of the best pass rushes in the history of the NFL. I think they fell 2 sacks short with extra games, so maybe they fell
15 more sacks than any other team in the league this year.
Yeah, they fell 2 sacks short of the record for a single season, and they maybe set the record, including playoffs. Again, they get extra games if you give them playoffs and if you give them week 18. So they were not the best pass rush ever, but they were in the conversation without a doubt. They, I believe, led the league in EPA per play on defense. Maybe they were 3rd or 4th, actually.
They were 3rd or 4th, yeah.
Yeah, they were, like, bar none, one of the best defenses we've seen in recent years. They had a lot of talent. And they had relatively easy schedule. It wasn't, it was easy, but it wasn't maybe the easiest schedule in the world. But you can't take away that for 20 games, this was an incredible defense. And they were solid last year as well, with far less talent on the defensive side of the ball. And then you get to the Super Bowl and they fell apart. Like, they did not look like the defense we had seen, but it was against what I think we have all kind of come to agree is a top 5 probably head coach of all time. And the best damage he does, obviously, is on the offensive side of the ball. And we talked about this a few weeks ago when Brady retired, but probably the most gifted quarterback ever, right? Like, GOAT or not, probably the most physically gifted quarterback.
He's already the GOAT. I'm ready to start the debate.
I'm totally ready to start. As a person who can't remember, when was Brady's first season? Like late 99, 01 or something?
2000 is he's a rookie, I believe. 2001 is
Brady's probably going to have the best career ever, but like, we're already to the point where if you were starting a franchise and you knew you were getting the player for their entire career, you're probably already picking Mahomes. Like, because you're not Belichick. You're not going to be able to pair him with Belichick. So, like, and obviously we don't know how the rest of Mahomes' career is going to go, but, like, I already want Mahomes, what he's done to this point, plus what he's adding on.
Yep.
We also have to say, I mean, it's going to be so fun and annoying to have these debates over, like, the next 10 or 15 years. But like, the eras are different. The eras do matter. Part of Brady's greatness was like he was amazing at the end of the old era, and then amazing on the vanguard of the new passing era.
But he was a game manager when he was winning those first Super Bowls.
He came up. That's what I'm saying. He came up at like the end of the fire and brimstone era of football. And
my point is, like, it's a different thing. Like, I'm not saying Brady hasn't had the greatest career of all time. If that's really what we're saying the GOAT is,
I know
that's the GOAT. You're the GOAT in the sense that you did the best stuff. No one can deny that. He's the GOAT. But like, what is the GOAT really? Shouldn't it be the guy that we would actually start a franchise with?
Yeah. To Zoomers, the GOAT will go down as Mahomes. And we're sidetracked. The point I was making in general was that, your defense didn't look great against maybe the GOAT quarterback, the GOAT talent quarterback, and one of the best offensive minds the league has ever seen. Not surprising. They do that to most teams. So I don't want to hold the Super Bowl too much against Jonathan Gannon and the Eagles defense. But no doubt, a bad showing. Something that will go down as like a final stain on an otherwise really strong stretch from Gannon. I think it's a solid hiring, but I do think so much of what I value, especially for the Cardinals, who entire team's outlook is basically just like Kyler Murray. If he returns to 2021 Kyler Murray, we really have a chance. No matter the deficit of talent we have on defense, or if we have like aging receivers, stuff like that, there's a chance if Kyler Murray is just uncorking gem deep balls, running for nearly 1,000 yards, doing all of it. He didn't do that last year, and they need to find a way to get him back to that spot. Hiring a defensive-minded head coach isn't like my favorite choice to do that. And if an offensive coordinator comes in and gets him back to that spot, they're probably getting hired away rather quickly in 2 or 3 more years. So I don't think the Gannon hiring in a vacuum was bad at all. Like, I think the Super Bowl is going to get overblown when we look back at his tenure with the Eagles. I think more so you really got to hone down on an offensive coordinator and an offensive system. Like, the guys underneath that coordinator need to be able to step up years down the road. That's still a tall task, where if you had just hired an offensive-minded head coach, you'd hired what I think was one of the best hires the offseason, Shane Steichen. You don't have to plan so many steps ahead in this sort of 3D chess type of thing.
Wait, but why isn't it a bad hire then? If it's a defensive, isn't it Brandon Staley all over again? Where you're getting,
it is, actually,
are you building around Kyler Murray or not? And maybe this signals that The answer is that they're not, and they're just going to try to tank next year and keep Kyler out for as long as possible.
I mean, they're tanking next year. That is like, I mean, Kyler's going to be back like middle of the season, even if he's back
well,
early.
Maybe not.
They're yeah,
an
exactly.
insanely horrific roster too.
And yeah, the thing is, they're gonna without Kyler, they're gonna lose a ton of their games up until they get him back. And when they get him back, like they had him for most of last year, and they did not look that good. I get the coaching should be better. I don't think the coaching was great last year, but it is a talent depleted roster with their maybe star quarterback. Without that star quarterback, those games are going to be rough. So I do think next year, no matter what, like this decision tells us about their future, like I think they also have like the longest odds for the Super Bowl, which isn't surprising. Like the numbers tell us next year should be bad. Your eye test tells us next year should be bad. So yeah, I think Gannon should be a good head coach, a good leader of a team, and control a good defense. And this team's defense is so lacking of talent that they need someone who can get more than the sum of their parts. But I agree. Like I'm putting it a little more lightly than you are, Kerrane, but I am on your side that like this still leaves so much legwork to be done on the offensive side of the ball that if we're ranking them, it's not my favorite.
Kerrane was kind of getting at the point that was like the wrong archetype for the hire. Just forget like the individual person, like the wrong archetype. And I think it was the wrong archetype for like a different reason too. Like for both reasons, like whenever you have a franchise quarterback, especially like a beleaguered one, it needs to be an offensive mind. I mean, his extension is like just now kicking in too. So they're committed to Kyler at least 2 or 3 more years. And like, why would you not pair him with an offensive minded head coach? But I also just think, I mean, I don't say this very often, but I've made this point before. I think they absolutely needed like a retread head coach, a retread. Is it retread?
I think it's retread, right?
Tread,
yes. Yeah. They need a retread head coach.
We need a coach who's failed before.
They need a coach. They just need a coach who's like proven like as a leader of a football team, because like Kyler Murray is clearly was a problem last year with the coaching staff, and like they need like another like center of power, and like they need someone just like who can stand up to the quarterback, I guess. And like to me, they interviewed Brian Flores. I had no idea why they didn't hire Brian Flores, who is Jonathan Gannon, except we've already seen him as a head coach put together elite defenses and with personnel that was like not amazing in Miami. It's not like it was bad. Like if they were going to go for a defensive minded hire,
although like, I mean,
it was so
people
bad
were pretty shaky on Tua coming out of the Flores era. Like, if you're trying to like restore faith in a young quarterback, I don't know if I.
It's true, but that's another thing. Eric Kyler was like confident enough to go toe to toe with Flores. I think they could have established like a yin and a yang, and he was much more established than Tua was, even though he's had some setbacks and some foibles. Kyler, where I actually thought they could have established like an equilibrium with each other. But now you have a guy who's like never led a team, like who's doesn't seem to be a fire and brimstone type personality, where Flores is like a very old school personality. Like I actually thought they were like the perfect place for Brian Flores to get his second shot as a head coach. But instead,
I'm actually surprised. It makes me wonder like why Gannon took the job on some level. Like, you know, if you're Brian Flores or a retread coach that, you know, you're looking for that other opportunity, maybe you're not sure if another one's going to come along. That's one thing. Gannon probably would have had, the Eagles look like they're going to be good again. Like,
take that chance.
So I guess that's true. But like, this is a franchise that like, what is the plan? You know, like they're going to be tanking.
They're not good at that part.
Yeah. Like they could be in the wilderness for a while.
A long time.
And coaches, as we've seen with the Texans, like it's hard to survive that, you know, like Gannon could be out after a year or two. If they're, I mean, I assume with as obvious as the tank is next year, he should be fine. But like, I don't know, is he going to survive 3 years of the Cardinals not being any good?
No. And like the way you want like the quarterback extension to kick in, you want to already be like a divisional round level team. You know, like the Bills were, like the Chiefs obviously were. Instead, they have like the massive salary cap numbers kicking in, right? As they have like no talent and like they have a new GM, they have a new coach. It's horrible roster construction. And just going back to some Gannon truthing a little bit, you know, going into the Super Bowl, it was a storyline. Like, I know the Eagles defense has been great on paper all year, like great with the eye test all year, but like how they faced such an unimposing slate of quarterbacks. Like Mahomes, it's not like Mahomes is a unique challenge for anyone. Like he's lit up so many elite defenses. Like you really do get a dispensation. But it is funny. It's like a storyline people were monitoring heading into the Super Bowl comes to fruition. It's just kind of like how great. Clearly, they were above average defense, and clearly they were top 10 defense. Like, was this defense as good as it actually appeared, or was it a product of a schedule of Daniel Jones, Andy Dalton, Dak Prescott, who they lost to because they were starting Gardner Minshew, Justin Fields, Daniel Jones? I don't even remember who the Titans started.
They played. You said Daniel Jones twice, but that's not true. They played Davis Webb one of those times.
Oh, that's right. Exactly. That's right. That's right. That's right.
Did they play Cooper Rush early in the year?
They did. They played Cooper Rush. They played the Steelers. They played the Texans. They played the Commanders. They played the Colts.
Which bad Steelers quarterback did they play? Because that would maybe change my mind.
I believe it was that game. Where was the other guy? Kenny Pickett, whatever his name is.
Oh, I think was that a Trubisky? Because that was fairly early on.
It was Halloween. I'm looking.
Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, doesn't really matter.
They completely crushed the Steelers. That was they might have seen both because they beat them so bad.
I remember that.
It's Kenny Pickett. No, Najee Harris completed a pass this game. So did Chase Claypool. Wow, Steelers were down bad that day. You love to look back and find these box score Easter eggs. So we're a little dubious on the Gannon hire. Do we like the Steichen hire, though, for the Colts? Who, again, interviewed, like, without exaggerating, like 13 or 14 people. Do we like
And they got to the rare third round of interviews. Most teams get through the second one, and they're done. I was pretty confident we were getting Jeff Saturday at some point, and God bless.
It seemed like Irsay was trying to wait out Ballard and get his Saturday result, and he failed.
Yeah, they also maybe were trying to wait out the Super Bowl, but to me it looked like it was how far. It's like what the Texans have done up until this year with the Josh McCown thing. Can we get away with it? Let me no. Okay, no. The stove is still hot. We can't do it.
They float a trial balloon, and the U.S. Air Force immediately shoots it down, even though it's a hobbyist balloon.
I like this hire a lot. I joke about them nearly making what I think would have been a bad decision for the team's long-term outlook, but this hire, I mean. I all credit to Jalen Hurts for being the elite quarterback that he is and capitalizing on both like his physical and mental talents. But part of that comes down to the coaching that helped him get there as well. And it is impossible. We'll never be able to entangle what of his growth is on him versus his coaching setup and the people around him. But to the best of our ability, he made a solid leap into his second year and then a Josh Allen level leap from year 2 to 3.
Jalen Hurts is the best quarterback in the NFC now, which seems kind of insane. But it's partly how bad the NFC quarterback situation is.
I think Hurts is in the Burrow tier of quarterbacks. I mean, when you look at like his EPA, his CPOE, he was just as good as Hurts and Allen essentially. Like they traded off which one of that trio was best in terms of EPA per play, or which one was most accurate in terms of CPOE. PFF grade is similar as well. And you add in that he is one of the best rushing quarterbacks. I think another sidetrack. Luckily, we don't. There's not football.
I was in Indonesia for this, but my understanding is that like there was a couple like bad calls away from Burrow being better than Mahomes. Is that not how the NFL media was handling itself?
You missed the part after the part where Burrow was nearly the best quarterback, where again he was.
But now Hurts is better than Burrow. I thought okay.
Look, yeah, I was gonna flag that one, but I just let it move on.
I can't believe we're not
a little fickle here. Seem a little fickle.
Look, you did not catch me out here doing this Burrow over Mahomes nonsense. Again, we have the road for this podcast has some potholes in it, and I keep finding ourselves in potholes. Point I'm trying to make is the leap Hurts made was incredible. Really among like the biggest year X plus 1 leaps we've seen. How much of that was on Steichen? No clue. But do I want to bet on maybe that it's him versus a lot of these other OCs who have been solid but have never shown their offenses to blow up in the way that the Eagles did? Yeah, I want to make that bet 10 times out of 10. The same way that we wanted to get like Dable away from the Bills, and that appears to have worked out quite well. So these are the types of bets you want to make. Do I know if it works out? Of course, I have no clue if it works out, but I think it's one of the better bets you can make in today's NFL.
It was like the right textbook hire. It was truly a textbook hire. And one thing with Shane Steichen always kind of slips through the cracks, and Nick Sirianni actually reminded on Thursdays that Shane actually did call the plays on Sundays. Nick Sirianni is like the architect of this offense, but he truly hands off Sunday play calling duties. Like Andy Reid doesn't really do that. like Nick Sirianni, like hands off the Sunday play calling dude. So Shane Steichen was calling, week after week. There's this beautiful executing these beautiful game plans. We should say we don't know who really installed the game plan. Did an amazing job on Sundays, and just as Kerrane was kind of getting at earlier, something I firmly believe is you have to hire, and Kyle mentioned this too. You need to be hiring an offensive-minded head coach, unless there's like 5 or 6 defensive-minded like people who kind of break the mold. But in general, if you're taking a chance like on an unproven coordinator, you want to make it offensive coordinator 9 times out of 10, because as Kyle said, the second they have success, they just get plucked away. You don't want your offensive architect getting plucked away. Scheme is more important on offense than it is on defense. For personnel matters more on defense. The scheme, of course, matters on defense. But if you're building it in a lab, you want your hire to be offensive minded. And two, he's a guy with unknown upside because he's not a retread head coach. He's a guy who could just easily fit that blueprint of so many Sean McVay guys we've seen have success. It's the McVay blueprint with Nick Sirianni. Kerrane, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like the hire a lot. I mean, this is like kind of a weird bias that I have for the Eagles, but it's like when I was writing the walkthrough this year and I was trying to project, like obviously the whole point of it is I'm trying to predict what these offenses are going to do, what the game plans, how they're going to attack. And the Eagles were pretty easy to predict. Like you look at what the matchup was and, it's like, like they're might have a hard time against this pass rush. I bet they'll feature some shorter passing to Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith on screens, or wow, this is a really big mismatch with the run game. This could be a Miles Sanders week, or man, there were a couple times where it's like they should be able to have their way downfield, and then AJ Brown would have these blow up games, and so just that like they were kind of doing what it appeared to make sense to do on paper, made me kind of like them. Because it made me they doing what I thought they do, so I'm like, wow, they're so smart. But
we talked about it all year where they were so adaptable, they were so versatile, and they actually did do what made sense.
They changed. If you look at their overall philosophy, they're like a run first team, but they were a run first team largely because they had no problem going smash mouth when playing from ahead, but there were lots of times where they were in competitive situations or early in games and they were airing it out. And they were not afraid to pass the ball. They're not afraid to be aggressive. We saw that in the Super Bowl, not afraid to attack downfield at all. I think that is a really strong sign for what you're looking for in a head coach. It's one thing to be able to, call plays really well, which appears Steichen can do. But I think to be really detail oriented, design these game plans that are really intelligent. I feel like that's something that's probably going to have more weight going forward. It's going to be, I think, maybe a little bit more predictive of long-term success, that this guy is he was part of an organization that seemed to be really intelligent in terms of how it was attacking week to week. The same way we talk about Bill Belichick on the defensive side.
Yes, he checks all the boxes. I mean, he could fail spectacularly. We know how this goes. But hiring a first-time head coach, I feel like Shane Steichen basically checked every single box. Smaller cycles than usual.
Sorry, I'm just curious on your guys' thoughts on what it might mean for the Colts. Do you think that this basically locks in that they're taking one of the rookie quarterbacks?
Yeah, they basically already said that on accident.
Irsay and Ballard were doing some, end of season interview. I don't know, whatever their interview they were doing. And Irsay dropped a little nugget that something about us getting our young quarterback, and Ballard just gives him the look.
And Kerrane, he basically phrased it the way you did, where he basically said, well, obviously now we're going to take a young quarterback since we've hired this kind of coach. And Ballard had seen a ghost. His name is Jim Irsay. He haunts
the Bears just immediately start picking up the phone like, hey, what do you think about the number 1 overall pick?
I know. I mean, I guess it's not that big of a deal. Everyone already knew
exactly,
anyway, but it's still, you don't just come out and say it. There's a reason why coach speak exists. So they're taking a quarterback, Pat.
Yeah.
Irsay seems a little tired of the 37-year-old one last job gunslinger. This guy's going in retirement, but his buddies convinced him to pull one more robbery. That was kind of the Colts approach.
And he robbed us of a 3rd round pick. That's the ultimate price.
It seems like they're getting off that carousel. So, the coaching carousel is much smaller than usual this year. Only, quote, 5 teams hiring new coaches. That is Shane Steichen to the Colts, Jonathan Gannon to the Cardinals, Frank Reich to the Panthers, Sean Payton to the Broncos, and D'Amico Ryans to the Texans. Who do you guys think was the best hire of this cycle? Start with you, Patrick Kerrane.
Wait, overall or of the other guys?
Overall, of the top 5. I mean, I know that you might not have even heard of some of these guys. You've been in Asia for a while, but who is the best coaching hire of this cycle of those 5?
I mean, Steichen would be the guy that I'm most excited about. Yeah,
I'll go my number 2 because I agree with Pat. Steichen to me. I'll actually go D'Amico Ryans. I do think one edge he will have among defensive coaches is that he'll probably have a pretty strong pipeline of Shanahan guys that he can just always hire the passing game coordinator, the so-and-so. If I believe they hired Bobby Slowick as
which he has already done. Yeah.
Yes. Slowick was a 49ers guy. If the offense gets a rookie, they do well, and Slowick gets hired away to another team, he can probably at least have a quicker ramp-up period to get the next run game coordinator, pass game coordinator, quarterbacks coach from Shanahan and make him his new offensive coordinator, which I think is maybe a slight edge that he can provide. He will always have like a pipeline of
or from Mike McDaniel, he can poach his guys too.
Exactly. Yeah. He has like this pipeline network of guys he can continue to poach. I'm still lean more towards you should be hiring offensive coordinators, the most young, successful ones, as your next head coach in the NFL. But if you're going to do a defensive coordinator, I think this is like easily one of the best ways you can do it. Hire a guy with connections to the best coaches in the league who's had success on his side of the ball, obviously. So he'd actually be my number 2. I agree that Steichen for me is the best hire we got.
I will say too, like to the kind of coach archetype point, I think if you're in a position like the Texans where like, yeah, they're going to be drafting a quarterback. And so the offensive side of the ball is obviously hugely important, but they also just like need to like completely rebuild that organization. And the guys that have been, like if you look at like Harbaugh, right? Like he was special teams coordinator, and it's more just about like getting the organization in the right
place. This was like a culture hire. I mean, clearly it was a defensive coordinator hire too. He did an amazing job coordinating the 49ers defense, but this was clearly about like resetting the culture in Houston.
Yeah.
Which was horrible.
And he seems like a great hire for that.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing with Ryans, I've made this point in a previous show, is, how the second year in a row, Nick Bosa's defensive coordinator is getting hired. So how do you separate what is like this elite personnel from the coordinator? But that's who gets hired, is coordinators from teams that, because a lot of times that's what allows a good coach to shine, is when they have good players. And he took advantage of his good personnel and absolutely shined as the 49ers.
Also, like, Saleh seems like a pretty good coach to me. So, I mean, it's not like it'd be one thing if Saleh kind of got exposed.
He's got this one weird trick holding him back, though.
What, a quarterback?
The worst quarterback situation in the NFL.
But don't you think like a lot of coaches would have gotten? I mean, that's like a pretty tough thing to outlast, like the number 2 pick busting real hard. And he seems to be riding that out like pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, the team, they were in playoff
contention year, though, in 2023 for sure.
Sure, I agree with that. But to have such, to Kerrane's point, to have such bad quarterback play, the most important like single position in sports, have it be among the worst, no matter what you do.
Yeah, and Chris Strebler played a hell of a quarter.
Not just among the worst, but like from the guy you took number 2 overall.
Yeah. So not only to like hold the team together from like everyone is not trying to get you fired perspective, but also they were in the playoff until I think week 17 is when they officially got knocked out, I think, if I remember correctly, this past year. So like, and I think that's sort of the floor that you're looking for, the floor ceiling combo you're looking for from someone like Ryans, is to have him be like a Harbaugh, Salah, Tomlin type, where like great for the locker room, a floor of like 8 wins every single year. And if you get the positions right, a ceiling of, a Super Bowl contender type.
Not that this really matters, but it was pretty interesting to me, like the final 2 months of the season, like everyone in the NFL was like, yeah, someone needs to hire D'Amico Ryans. Like he became like the kind of like spontaneous movement guy, where just like people were like unprompted, like start talking about D'Amico Ryans. And it just seemed like he was a known star already in league circles. And talking about just a team that had to go in a totally different direction, head coach, than I don't know about hiring. They hired like back-to-back 65-year-olds, not to be ageist, but they needed a culture reset, and they needed.
Lovie Smith's kind of a legend for winning that last game.
I mean, Lovie.
Let's give the man his due.
That actually should be at the top of his Wikipedia. That really should be at the top of his Wikipedia. Not as amazing.
An all-time move.
Yeah,
it's so good.
He was so good as Rams defensive coordinator. Really, really good as Bears head coach. But that needs to be at the top of his Wikipedia. He did. And Week 18 as Texans head coach.
So good.
I was going to ask you guys your least favorite hire of this cycle, but it's a weird cycle where. Honestly, you can like nitpick a lot of these hires, but this is like if Jonathan Gannon is like the worst of the 5, that's pretty good because Jonathan Gannon, as far as like archetypes go, still pretty good. He's not a retread. He's coming from a really, really smart coaching staff. So it probably already says something that Nick Sirianni like trusted this guy. He's walking into a horrible situation, but I mean, the 2 retreads are kind of just like no-brainer retread. Like no one can have complaints about Frank Reich or Sean Payton getting hired.
I can complain about Sean Payton.
And then the first time,
you're not in on the Sean Payton hire?
I don't think it's a bad hire. I do think it is like you have gambled your entire future by giving up a first-round pick for a guy who I think he's a great coach, but
it
also
sort of seems like he wants to get paid.
Yeah, wants to get paid for sure. And we have no clue what he's like without Drew Brees. Like, how many games did he coach in New Orleans without Brees? It's probably under 20.
Brees was terrible those last few years, though. I mean, his arm was dead.
I mean, like, the team wasn't great then.
You can say that now that he doesn't work for NBC anymore, Pat.
I mean, great at broadcasting.
No, I think Payton's fine. I think it's just so risky to say, you know what this team needs right now? Now seeing that Russell Wilson was terrible last year, a deficit of talent in the future. That's what we need, is bringing in less good players. The trade-off is you bring in a really good head coach. So I do think like you have bet so much that Russell Wilson is who he was in Seattle, and that wasn't a part of the structure he was in there, and that Sean Payton.
I don't see it that way. I think if you're sending the pick to get Payton, I think it kind of gives you more like flexibility going forward, because now you've kind of bet on this additional thing. And so, like, if Wilson stinks next year, which is a good chance he does, then, like, you kind of now have this new out of, like, moving on from Wilson. Now you have the cover of, like, we brought in Peyton and he still stinks. You can move on from Wilson. Yeah, maybe you're, like, kind of out there for a while, but there's this, like, we have Sean Payton coat of paint on the franchise that you're not a complete disaster. I don't know. I think it kind of makes sense. I think it gives them, like, a much better chance of salvaging something from Wilson, like a much better chance.
They're like stuck with Wilson for like 3 more seasons.
No, they're not. They could move on after this season for, they have to eat a lot of stuff. But
I mean, like they could cut him now if they want to eat 107 million dead cap. They're still on the hook for 50 million up through 2025.
I mean,
so much money.
It's been done before, but yeah, it wouldn't be recommended.
Yeah, it wouldn't be great. I'll give you that.
They didn't draft a first round pick last year, right? Are they not drafting one this year as well?
They're not, Kyle, and they had finally gotten one from trading Bradley Chubb, and then they traded
it
for
yeah.
coach.
That's
they traded it for someone who doesn't play football.
Yeah, I mean, I think Peyton's still will be a good head coach, but they're stuck with Russell Wilson or a giant cap deficit to work with just every year. They begin, there's that Russell Wilson toll. Who's like the baseball player who gets paid $1 million every year by the Mets, maybe?
Bobby Bonilla.
Yeah, like that thing, but it's like 30 million every year for a few years. And they're like,
they'll trade him the Panthers. Frank Reich will take on his $1 million.
The Panthers are a team that would do that too. But also they're like, we've got some young up and coming players that we've taken in the 4th and the 7th round because we don't have any first round picks over the past few years. Like they have definitely vibes of like, if this specific connection doesn't work out, we are dead for years to come.
I think it was a pretty sensible gamble. I mean,
it's fine. I don't think
they needed the pick really bad. They were a team that actually needed that, even though it was like number 26 or whatever. Like they didn't need that pick. But I mean, as bad as Russell Wilson was last year, I mean, I do think a lot of it was the coaching. There's no one to rein him in. Like Sean Payton is established as it gets. Will rein in whatever was going on with Russell Wilson. Was apparently like using like the wrong audibles and so like it seemed like not prepared. But who was also not prepared was the coach, Nathaniel Hackett. Just seemed totally unready for the moment. Didn't meet the moment whatsoever. I mean, it was the classic. They couldn't even get the plays in. Like that kind of stuff's just not going to happen with Sean Payton. Like, so Sean Payton's a great hire. Pay him $25 million a year because he's going to get to play in. That's why you want to hire.
Hey, good news is
I think it will be better than that.
Payton doesn't count against the cap. Coaching hires don't count against the cap, and they can afford it. I think they're owned by the Walmart family now. So
they are. They can afford to just wantonly waste money on a coach who seems, frankly, maybe more interested in fishing than coaching at this point.
Well, let's hope not. That would be pretty tough scene for the Broncos. It'd be kind of amazing if Peyton is also washed.
I know. It would be so good. It would be so good. He seemed a little checked out the final few years in New Orleans.
Don't let him have any control over the cap.
No, because and just beyond that, Pat, too, every year there's rumors like, Sean Payton might get traded. Like, wow, I'm not sure if a coach should keep leaking that he wants to get traded every year.
Yeah. The man gave Taysom Hill way too much money. Do not let him anywhere near the books.
Man, yeah, the Saints books are cooked if you've looked getting ready for the offseason.
Can I throw out a potential worst hire of the hiring cycle? Brian Schottenheimer is the OC. That is real rough.
This is a good one.
Unbelievable. What is happening? I actually feel like maybe we're not freaking out enough about what's going on in Dallas.
You mean the guy who unlocked Russell Wilson before we turned out he was never good at all?
Yeah. People forget about Shoddy in Seattle, but go on. Go off, man. Pat.
Well, it's just a sign, right, that it really is going to be McCarthy. Like, if McCarthy wanted to just, completely ensure that he was going to have total control over the offense, you bring in Schottenheimer. No one is going to be clamoring for Schottenheimer to have more control over this offense. No. So it's kind of a genius move by McCarthy. And unfortunately, every concern that we had after, McCarthy's taken over from Kellen Moore, what this offense is going to look like, I think is reinforced by the Schottenheimer hire. And God, they're already kind of too conservative. They're already the run first team. I think they could be really bad. The Cowboys could be really bad next year. It's going to, maybe a huge bummer for fantasy.
It'd be a huge bummer, but it'd also be Cliff's gone. Jeff Saturday's gone. We need a new hero to emerge to make fun of and tweet about every week.
That's true.
He's a good candidate, yeah.
Mike McCarthy is probably.
Hopefully Peyton is checked out. He would be a good candidate because Peyton checked in, showing up to work every day, putting in his hours. It should go well. He was a really smart, creative coach with the Saints. A checked out head coach, there's almost nothing funnier. The Urban Meyer scandal after scandal after scandal was my favorite era of NFL football, and it wasn't. I
didn't even enjoy it. It was too bad.
I loved it.
Jeff Fisher was checked out with the Rams, man.
That's the level
That's a good checked out, yeah.
Fisher was so checked out. They hired him listen, man, we're moving the team. Just I don't care.
Do you remember in Hard Knocks when the team dropped him off at a bus stop or something and just left? At the very end. I forget exactly what it was, but there's a thing of him and his wife, I think, and they're waving goodbye to the team, and I guess they're going to LA or something. It's just so good. It's so good.
That. It sounds like
they dropped him on a farm upstate or something.
Come on, man.
That's future Michigan Panthers head coach Jeff.
Sure, does he still have that job, or does that league even exist yet? What's the
Yes,
deal?
The league still exists. I don't know if he kept the job year over year though.
I think he did. Well, hey, in St. Louis, we're getting excited about the XFL, man. The Battle Hawks, Anthony Beck, the season getting going pretty soon here. Caca is what we say here in St. Louis. We love our Hawks.
We do, brother.
We love our Hawks. So we also love our Rotoworld Football Show, which will be right back after this. Every season is draft season. Get your Rotoworld Draft Guide bundle today and dominate your football, baseball, and basketball drafts. They're packed with profiles, rankings, projections. Order today and get all 3 Rotoworld Draft Guides for the price of 2. Plus, use promo code BUNDLE5 and save an extra $5 at checkout. That is promo code BUNDLE5 for an extra $5 off at checkout. And don't forget, download the Rotoworld app to receive breaking player news all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players in your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. The Rotoworld app is available in your app store today. Guys, it's February 16th as we record this, and you inform me over text that it's already best ball season.
I'm on the clock right now.
And wow. I'm kind of scared, just to be honest. But yeah, I'd like to see this addiction lead to something, Kerrane. Like to see this, result in anything whatsoever. Yeah, so it did pay off for you last year.
I did it, Dad. Okay.
I know you did. You made it to the big city. You were playing at Carnegie Hall. You were correct.
I've been playing at Carnegie Hall. That's right.
You're playing Carnegie Hall. Now you want to go to Madison Square Garden this year. That's what you want. Yeah, you informed me people are already drafting, and it functions as a pretty interesting look ahead to early 2023 drafts, which will be getting going. So are already going, but even like normal people will start drafting like May and June.
Hey man,
Kyle, you highlighted
even well-adjusted people will be drafting in 3 months.
Yeah, I know exactly. Sorry, the way I phrased that. Even people who aren't just hopelessly sick and addicted to this will be drafting by May and June.
That's right.
Even Kyle, people will be drafting in 3 months. Kyle, all right, one more, Daugherty, then we go to the next segment.
Yeah, you highlighted some interesting ADPs so far. There are 3 quarterbacks currently going in the top 16 or 17 and on underdog already. What do you make of this? Late round QB, it's always been a little more dead in best ball, but is it deader than ever heading into 2023?
Yeah, I don't think this is like a bad reaction. I don't know if I'll be getting a ton of these players, but like it makes sense, right? You look at even like where, especially in best ball, where the bigger games are really what matters. Like Kirk Cousins putting in his hours and getting you between 13 and 19 every week, even if that results in a good average, the average QB 10 or whatever, isn't particularly useful. It's the spike weeks that matter the most. And frankly, I think that's probably underrated in season long as well, right? But even just looking at best ball, it's those big weeks that matter. And you got just almost no big weeks from the latter half of the quarterback range last year. It was like Geno Smith gave you some big weeks. Jared Goff gave you some big weeks. Then you have to go all the way up the line to like Justin Fields, like QB 14 or whatever, to find consistent big weeks. So that's a gap of 20 quarterbacks, including some of the guys who are drafted as like he may or may not play this year, like 20 some guys, where 2 of them were able to give you just multiple weeks over like 25 points. So we saw in the outcomes last year that the way to get 30 burgers from your quarterback consistently was to have one of the elite ones. So I think the adjustment makes sense. Do I think that it's maybe an over adjustment? I think that's probably true. I think almost every year we see the market look at what happened last year and say, that's what's going to happen again this year. We need to do that. I think there will probably be some breakout quarterbacks in the second half of the QB range, the QB2 and beyond, who consistently give you big games, or maybe consistent wouldn't be the word, but who are able to give you multiple big games. It's just picking them out, especially last year. It was really hard. Like Geno Smith being the guy, one of the 2 guys that really got you there if you went super late at quarterback. That one is mind-blowing. Goff, a little bit so, less so. Geno Smith really was something special.
Kerrane, what do you think of the 3 quarterbacks going in the top 16, 17, by the way, of course, Patty Mahomes, Josh Allen, and the new best quarterback in the NFC, Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, I'm not really into it. I think that it's a lot to pay for quarterback. I don't think it's like maybe crazy off. Like if these guys were more like in the 3rd round, I probably would be more interested. But it is a lot to spend on a quarterback when you can find spike weeks later in the draft. Not usually at the very end of the draft, as Kyle was noting, but there usually is a pocket of quarterbacks kind of going around where Fields was, where Lawrence was, that will provide some of those spike weeks more infrequently, but you can use 3 quarterback builds with those guys. I think 3 quarterback builds this time of year probably makes more sense anyway, because there's way more uncertainty, and so you're kind of giving yourself more of a chance to have 3 healthy quarterbacks throughout the course of the season, and then fill or get enough healthy weeks because you have 3. So I think what it is that kind of early on right now, there's so much uncertainty at the top of the draft. People aren't sure who they're going to take, and so it's like, well, I know Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes, so I'm just going to go ahead and lock him up at like the 15th pick, and then I'll figure out the rest later. But these are very top-heavy tournaments that are going on right now. And my feeling is that Mahomes and Allen and Hurts will be pricier than they were last year, but probably cheaper than they are now. So I'm likely to get my exposure to those ultra elite quarterbacks, or at least most of my exposure later, I think is going to be my plan. Get them when they're going more like the 3rd, maybe the early 4th, something like that, and try to be right in these early rounds with the skill players. I mean, because you're getting a chance to, get more skill players than you like. The skill player pool sort of getting like there's more value in it because there's quarterbacks mixed in. So, and because there's so much uncertainty, you could potentially create pairings here that are just absolutely dominant in ways that is harder to do later in the summer when we have a much better idea of which skill players should be going at the very top. So I'm more inclined to try to figure out quarterback later, maybe not super later, but just, maybe in those mid rounds, those late single digit, early double digit rounds, and let the rest of the field get their super early quarterbacks.
Crane, do you have any of these spiky quarterbacks you're looking at? The only one that sticks out to me is like no floor would be the correct way to put it, but has the potential to be, I'll say this upcoming year's.
I know who you're saying.
Trey Lance.
Yes.
I don't think Trey Lance has been good for his first 2 years, but our sample size is small. And also our sample size shows us that he wants to run like Justin Fields, like as much and put up as many yards. He's one that I'm like, I actually don't love dipping as deep because you get to like Aaron Rodgers, Stafford, Carr. Like these guys have like, so as a zoomer, I have just no interest in them. Trey Lance is one who his range of out as wide as any quarterback in the NFL, but that's okay. This is a tournament. We want the guys who can either, I don't care if I don't make my top 2 in my league, if it gives me the chance to make number 1.
I think Trey Lance might be a trap actually, because you're the whole game comes down to week 17, right? So you have to have, and to take on a guy who might not be a starter in week 17, and there's he's got there's real job uncertainty around Trey Lance in week 17.
There would have been more if Brock Purdy had not blown out his elbow.
But that's when he's most likely to be healthy, right?
Maybe. I mean, this seems like a year, man. It just seems like a year. And
I know. I hear that, and then I'm like, all this 49ers talk is like he'll be ready by training camp. So
that's just Looney Tunes, not
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also
but
think
still, like if Purdy comes back,
you could have said this about oh, Derek Carr. Of course, Derek Carr's gonna be out there week 17. Of course, like Stafford's gonna be out there week 17. I agree. It's definitely, I kind of fall on your side a little bit that like if I had to predict a starter in week 1 that won't be in week 17, Lance is up there.
He's on the list.
Anything can happen. But what I'm suggesting is why take on additional known risk. Like there's sort of known risk with Lance.
Mm-hmm.
There's, we don't know, like, sure, but Stafford, he got hurt, and any of these guys can get hurt. But do you really want to take on a guy like, Kenny Pickett, who I think stinks, but Kenny Pickett's going to be a starter at the end of this season. Should he be a starter? No, but he will be because they're not going to go away from him. So, and like, in a sense, I'm actually maybe more interested in like Bryce Young than Trey Lance. Bryce Young starting week 17 next year, and probably very early into the season, he will be a starter as well. Because obviously, if the guy doesn't start until week 9 or something, that's going to probably kill the team. You need to have points from the, where you're taking him. He got an ADP of 125. You probably need points pretty early on in the season. But I think you're going to get it with Bryce Young. So I think Trey Lance right now going ahead of Bryce Young. I'd probably rather take Young.
I'm just looking through CJ Stroud currently going ahead of Mac Jones. Tough scene for Mac Jones there. Brock Purdy currently going ahead of Jimmy Garoppolo. Will Levis going ahead of Ryan Tannehill. Real tough scene for Ryan Tannehill. Real tough scene for Ryan Tannehill. But it's going to be crazy at quarterback. One of the players, Patrick Kerrane, Patrick Mahomes is going in front of. Patrick Kerrane is currently
Freudian slip.
I know, the 16th overall. Hey, similar level of accomplishments in 2022. They both
world champions.
Both
out of football.
He's got 2 now. He's got 2.
So Bijan Robinson is currently the 16th or the 14th overall player. I can maybe see why early drafters are more comfortable going with Patrick Mahomes ahead of someone where we don't even know what team he'll be on yet. But what do you guys think of Bijan being almost a first-round pick? Like, is it just worth it? Because the potential upside is just so monstrous. I mean, like, the range of outcomes include being, I don't know, maybe the RB1 overall, or is that just way, way, way too aspirational? Whereas Pat said, you're trying to really like so much uncertainty in these early rounds, you're really kind of just trying to hit skill player home runs. What do we think about Bijan?
I think Bijan's he's an awesome prospect.
He's real good.
Yeah. So what I was talking to Ben Gretsch was making the point, and Pete Overzet was making the point last night that he's probably in most scenarios, Robinson will probably fall a little bit from here. The NFL draft never really goes how we want it to go, right? Like teams, and then we forget later, but like DeAndre Swift went to the Lions when they had Kerryon Johnson, and it was like, God, what? It was such a headache. And then now it seems like, well, obviously Swift was going to beat out, but Swift is very good, and Johnson wasn't as good as we thought, and all this stuff clears up in ways that then like makes us forget what a headache it was in the first place. Jonathan Taylor went to the Colts when they had Marlon Mack, right? That cleared it. I mean, Mack gets hurt. Taylor's a superstar. That in retrospect seems like, why would that even be a problem? But something like that is I would say the most likely scenario. It's never going to be quite as clean as Najee Harris going to the Steelers. The Steelers like signaling that from the very first days of the offseason. Yeah. And then announcing basically they're going to give him every touch and then doing so, now imagine if Harris was good, so it rarely works out like that. Obviously if a situation like that materializes, kind of like a Zeke Elliott to the Cowboys, a Harris to the Steelers, Robinson could be a top 5 pick. I think Robinson would like defensively be the 101 in a situation like Elliott to the Cowboys.
Eagles,
but I don't think
I've seen that one mocked before. They would obviously be leaving.
Kyle's been trying to make this happen in the work Slack that the Eagles are going to take Bijan.
I hope not, man.
He's been trying to make it happen.
I don't know if I'm trying to make it happen. I think I'm trying to ease the blow when it does happen. I don't want it to happen, although it would be great, dude.
Who cares? Yeah, make a luxury pick. Who cares? Just do it.
Like,
I said don't pull a Chiefs, then that's unfair because it'd be like if they took JT instead of CEH. But
yeah, exactly. Imagine if the Chiefs took the best running back in the class instead of the guy who lost out to like Damian Williams and
had fallen behind Rojo by the end.
He sure did. 2 rings for Rojo, by the way. 2 Super Bowl rings. Don't forget it.
Good God.
Yeah, I mean, his
same number as
range of
Mahomes.
outcomes.
Just saying.
It's true. Facts are facts.
Bijan's range of outcomes in terms of where he goes in the draft is so wide. Like people are talking about him going to the Falcons, who pick 6, 7, or 8, somewhere in that range. And as far as down to the Bills at 27, and I have no clue where he goes in between there.
Even in this analytically enlightened era, he's not falling beyond the top 10 or 12. This isn't going to happen. Someone's going to be like, whatever, I don't care. I know he's a running back. I want him for his rookie contract. He's the missing piece to our offense. Someone's going to do it. He's not going to fall beyond the top 10 or 12. The
analytics movement has gotten us far enough to say exactly what you said. I see this a lot on Twitter. Is like, don't re-sign him. Run him out for the rookie contract.
Exactly.
I'm not sure you get what I'm saying when I talk, but forget about it. Because I see that a lot. But I think that's probably a sentiment that is at least echoed somewhat in league circles as well. Is that like, sure, you can't pay him a ton of money, but you can still spend on him. So yeah, I agree. Like he could easily go like 6.
He just seems like he's probably the best running back prospects in Saquon, right? And
yes, for sure.
Yeah.
It's not falling outside the top.
Or JT. I think JT was also kind of at that level.
He was a little more divisive just because he was coming from that Wisconsin system. He already had
the fumbles. The fumbles.
The fumbles. He had a lot
wasn't
of
like
mileage.
An elite pass catcher either, but Wisconsin threw 4 passes a game, so it's hard to really pin down what those numbers even meant.
His yards per route run were really good, though.
Mm-hmm.
He was paying like a Wisconsin penalty, I think, where Bijan is not going to have that problem.
Right, and he fell to the second round, and yeah, Bijan will not. So
Bijan will not. You wanted to mention Tony Pollard. Unsigned Tony Pollard, currently the RB13. I mean that feels way too low to me.
It feels way too low, right?
Feels way too low. With the caveat, third down guys does never ever get given. Like it seems like even if he escapes Dallas, which he probably will,
guys?
they don't get the bigger roles. They just don't.
Third down guys.
Wait,
saying,
hold on. What when you guys say low?
Hold on. I'm saying he's been typecast where his primary skill set is still a change of pace, catching passes. Even though he had a lot of success on early downs in Dallas, of course, this past season, the league coaching staffs, league front offices still ultimately view him as like an Austin Eckler type, and only Austin Eckler really ever has that kind of success with that kind of role.
So, Rotopat, when you say way too low, you mean he's being drafted too early?
No. I think he's going too late.
No, too late.
Too late. Yeah.
But you just said
Going
like
way
he's
too late.
been typecast in this. I'm
saying I think the only reason that it would maybe end up being a correct ADP is like every team's just going to use him like the Cowboys did. No one's really going to give him a bigger role, and the role got big enough, obviously. But like anytime we have hope for like a Tony Pollard type, like finally he's getting away from this coaching staff that just won't give him enough work on early downs. Like the new team almost always sticks with the same usage. That was the only thing I was trying to say until we got very, very sidetracked for the third time.
But aren't they talking about franchise tagging him?
Yeah, they are.
They Cowboys say all sorts of insane stuff. I mean,
so this, I think his best case scenario, as down as I am on the Cowboys, I think his best case scenario is that they franchise tag him, that they bring back Zeke, and you want them to bring back Zeke because
Malik Davis season behind Pollard.
Zeke is horrible. He's horrible. And if they bring back Zeke, they're going to play him as the number 2. Like that's what you want. Pretty much Malik Davis is better than Zeke, but Malik Davis will be blocked by Zeke's reworked contract. So Pollard operating as the 1A there and like having a massive talent gap between him and the number 2. And then on a team that like is probably going to be doing a bunch of suboptimal things like giving the running back too many touches is going to be kind of amazing for Pollard specifically. I think the overall offense will probably be extremely frustrating. And, if you're a Dak Prescott fan, it could be a tough time. But
I don't know about this bringing back a guy to take half the carries and the guy who still
it won't get half the carries. He won't be able to do it.
He can't physically do it anymore.
This feels like this.
It's Kamara and Mark Ingram. That's what it is. You want
that? That's a good outcome.
Yeah, Kamara was producing elite seasons with Ingram.
You back in the day. I thought you meant like the second.
I don't mean last year. No, I mean Kamara in his prime.
Man, I don't know about that.
No, like with Alvin Kamara, which would be I think another comp for Tony Pollard because like Kamara, he's not just a third down guy. He's an explosive. Yeah, maybe change of pace guy, but he's a lead back and he provides you an explosive element that you then need to have someone else kind of take on some of the workload from him, and that's okay for fantasy. We can deal with that. The only thing I was
trying to say is that, wherever he ends up, I feel like he's probably already at his touch ceiling. Even if he deserves more touches, I just think they will follow the Cowboys' lead and be like, we don't want this guy to get hurt. We need to keep him in the Austin Eckler, Alvin Kamara touch range. Yeah. So I'm just saying, I was saying, don't expect a touch increase if he ends up.
And I'm totally fine with that. I mean, Kamara in 2021, he gets all the touches we could ever hope for, but less receptions, and it's worse. It's not. We don't. Workhorse Kamara wasn't that fun. No. We actually want the guy getting enough carries where he can produce elite fantasy weeks, but not so much to where some of that explosion starts to get sapped. So I actually think like Elliott coming in for all of the really junk stuff. Yes, stealing some goal line work, which is going to be annoying.
A lot of goal line work too.
Hopefully less in my bull case. It would be less, but that would be the issue, right? That would be the issue that he steals some. Getting the Eckler case where like there's just literally no other capable running back on the roster except for this guy who's like essentially a receiving specialist is like such a rare outcome for a team. I just think you can hope for that, sure, but I think the
Cowboys
best
just won't allow
realistic
that
outcome.
Either. The Cowboys just won't even allow that. Like they would just run. They would just keep using their Joshua Kelly. They wouldn't like abandon it. They would just keep.
I mean, they had the last year. They kept using their Joshua Kelly.
It's true.
Yeah, they did. It's true. His name is Zeke Elliott.
Yeah, I think that outcome is almost dead. Like it's even we saw one of the games that Pollard started. Malik Davis came in and actually played a bit of that Zeke role. That's how we know that he might be better than Zeke is because we got some reps for him. So I think my only concern is that like what Pollard did on not a ton of touches is super hard to sustain. He did it
in 2021 too, though.
Yeah,
the dude has been amazing.
He did it too on a smaller sample as a rookie, but it has been the bulk of his career, much like Alvin Kamara, where like if you saw Alvin Kamara as a rookie and your brain only worked in spreadsheets, you're like, well, actually, he's going to regress and he won't be good anymore. No, like he's really, really, really good. You know, Kamara was a few years ago. Pollard was still there last year. I do hate the idea of drafting like a super committee back, losing a ton of goal line work this early. But I think Kamara comp actually sold me on it. I was surprised he was going this high. Now, like, thinking about him as a Kamara type actually makes a lot of sense for this ADP. And I think it's a correct way to think about it too.
Yeah, I think there's still this like untapped upside there, even though last year could have been his career ceiling for Pollard. I think there's like enough unknown upside that RB13, I would be taking him before RB13 is all I will say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Quickly to end the show, Kyle, you point out that both Jets skill dudes, Garrett Wilson and currently ACL Breece Hall, are going in the top 24 despite the ACL and despite us having absolutely no idea who the Jets quarterback is. What do we make of this? What do we think of this? People are saying, what do you guys think about this?
I mean, the market is clearly and probably correctly predicting that they're going to get a quarterback upgrade. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. I know they, like Joe Douglas has said, like, oh, we're going to do what's best for Zach Wilson. We're going to try and make him work. But, like, you make him work by putting him on the bench. Like, that's just how it would be best for probably him, definitely for the team. I think that's the ultimate outcome. Now it's just which quarterback do they get? If they get Derek Carr, like, this team should be good. I'm not through the roof about it. If they get Rodgers, again, like, Rodgers wasn't great last year, but it's a 1-year sample in which he lost the best receiver in the NFL, maybe.
And it sounds like he's already purchased his home in Las Vegas, by the way. He hasn't literally. I'm just saying, I think Rodgers is probably going to Vegas.
I think he's going to Vegas?
Yeah, not to sidetrack us yet again.
Yeah, I wouldn't be thrilled with the Jets getting Carr. He's probably good. He will have a good offensive system. Well, he doesn't say no how good, but I'll say he probably should have a good offense around him. But I just think it's so interesting that this team doesn't have a quarterback yet, and it's very unclear which one they will get. I mean, they could stumble all the way down to like getting Jimmy Garoppolo or something, or maybe the carousel just doesn't land on them, and they truly have no one, and they're forced to go back to Zach Wilson. That's in the range of outcomes.
Jameis, baby, no Jameis.
I don't think that's going to happen. There's like enough dudes out there.
I don't think it's going to happen, but like, what are the odds of it? 5%? Like, it's in the range of outcomes.
I don't think so. I think there's like,
I really don't think
quite
so.
Literally no way they will start Zach Wilson week 1. They've already said
even Garoppolo would be like a pretty big improvement.
They basically already said his confidence was so destroyed. They want him to like spend the year like learning how to play quarterback.
I mean, I don't think they should play him, but like Garoppolo goes to Tampa Bay, Rodgers goes somewhere else, and Carr goes somewhere else, and Rodgers, as you point out, could go to Vegas. Like, that's 3 of the better candidates gone right away. Like, I don't think it's likely, but that's in the range.
I mean, honestly, they get Andy Dalton. It's better than Zach Wilson. Like, Mike White showed us that Mike White was a massive upgrade. Like, remember how devastated we were to not have Mike White in DFS?
It was
like, it's like we can't play these guys with Zach Wilson. Mike White starting, we're playing all of them. We're jamming them. Like, that's Mike White. That's going from Wilson to Mike White. If they can bring in Jimmy Garoppolo, which is not obviously someone we're particularly excited about, it's a massive, massive improvement. I think that baking in optimism here makes a lot of sense because we know, and the numbers back this up. I mean, Zach Wilson in terms of EPA per play, horrendous, right? And we go to Mike White, wasn't great, but it wasn't horrific. You know, we kind of know that if they can bring in kind of anybody, that Mike White level of play can kind of probably be sustained. If they're able to bring in a Rodgers, I mean, these guys are underpriced by a fair amount.
That's true. That's a good point. Yeah, Rodgers, it's going to be the Jets or the Raiders. It's going to be so funny whatever team doesn't get him.
I was leaning Jets before I came on here. I actually thought Jets were more likely than Raiders.
I feel like he's been he can't, Rodgers is like, he wants to like seem like deep and mysterious, like there's levels to him, but he can't help. He always gives the game away where he basically like coming to the Raiders this year and he winks like, we'll see.
Has he talked about this?
He kind of has a little bit, I think, where he was telling Devontae Adams to buy him a house.
Okay.
Yeah,
I could see Ben Stiller playing Aaron Rodgers in a biopic.
And as an overwrought, like overconfident. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Really good. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Well, you know what's not fun as we end the show? I see you truly sick people have given Ryan Griffin an ADP. What's going on? Why you? Come on, guys, just stop.
I don't know what that's about.
Well, it's good. I guess he's being projected as the Bucs starter right now. But
how would that not be? Would it not be like Blaine Gabbert or Kyle Trask?
I guess they think it's him. Or is this? Was he on the Bucs or the Saints last year? Ryan Griffin.
I don't know. There's also, I think, a tight end, Ryan Griffin. Did I always get him?
Well, I'm on only the quarterbacks, so he.
I don't know what you're looking at, man. Because
no,
he
dude,
does not have an ADP in the.
He does. He's the QB. What I'm looking. He's the QB. He's
36. You're right.
He's between Wentz and McCoy. I guess he's getting projected as the Bucs starter. He was on the Bucs. He's getting projected as the Bucs starter. Is what's going on here.
I went straight to the source on Underdog. He does not show up with an ADP.
Well, on the 444 Underdog ADP, he does, Pat.
I'm sure he got drafted once, and you can't kick him out of the system at that point.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Backups. I mean, Bucs are an interesting spot though. Not for Ryan Griffin.
They're gonna have the worst quarterback situation in the league. I think even worse than the Jets.
I think they're gonna go retread. They're going like Jimmy or something boring.
Oof, man, that would be just awful.
Yeah, not great.
I did want to ask Kyle if what is your temperature on the rookie class? And obviously, we're going to talk more in depth on the rookie class, endlessly throughout the offseason. But just like generally a quarterback, because we've had just like a bad rookie class last year at quarterback, and we knew that everyone kind of acted accordingly in terms of drafting these guys for best ball. But the year before, we were promised a very good rookie class, and maybe it was okay because Lawrence has kind of recovered, Fields has recovered a bit. But it was a devastating year for rookie production from the quarterback position in 2021. This year, supposed to be, pretty solid quarterback class. But it feels to me, looking at the ADPs, like people are nervous about going there again. Maybe this is a zig while everyone is zagging. You don't draft rookie quarterbacks in best ball. Everyone knows it. That's like now the new, after 2 down years, that seems to be the conventional wisdom. But if this is a good rookie class and it doesn't massively disappoint like the 1-2 years ago, that could be a pretty big edge.
Yeah, when you said rookie class, I was like, yeah, the receivers looked like real priced up. Obviously, Bijan is super expensive. I think he deserves to be so. The one spot that doesn't seem to have happened, and like you said, it's based on a sample size of data. Now, what is that sample size? It's like 8 quarterbacks.
Essentially 1 year. I think it's based essentially on 1 year, 2021, because we knew last year that the class wasn't going to be very good.
We got 1 first-round pick last year, and he wasn't even like a high first-round pick. So yeah, It's not. I was thinking there were more last year. Yeah, it's 1 year, 2 years ago, plus sort of Kenny Pickett, I guess, if you want to throw him in. Maybe you could even throw in Malik Willis, because at this time last year we didn't know what would ultimately unfold with him. He was a potential at number 2. So 2 years of 6 data points. This is the one spot I totally agree that I thought the rookies were super undervalued here, especially there should be some decent landing spots for the quarterbacks. Like I think Washington, for example, depending on what they do with their quarterback situation, they're going to have really good receivers, decent running backs. I think that's a spot what if they get Eric Bieniemy or something? Like they could be a team where you throw a quarterback right in. Maybe it doesn't even start week 1. Maybe they try Sam Howell for a week or 2 or bring back Taylor Heineke. They could be a really good spot. Or when you look up at the top of the draft, you're at least securing almost for sure full starting seasons from whoever the Colts take, from whoever Houston takes. Like there are spots where if it's not the best situation, it's 17 games. And at least at that point, you have a large sample of if this guy is good, if the prospecting on Bryce Young or CJ Stroud is correct, he should give you some good fantasy weeks. So the draft I did like 30 minutes before we got on here, double rookie quarterback.
Yeah, that last point about, these guys starting right away, I think is absolutely critical, because 2 years ago, it wasn't just that the guys disappointed, but that Fields took a while to get on the field because of Matt Nagy, which something like that could happen again. Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo there. And, there was
even last year, Kenny Pickett, if you thought, well, I can get some usable weeks out of him, you missed the first 4 weeks and then he got hurt again later. So.
And who knows, maybe Houston does something weird where they start Davis Mills for a while, but like the Colts guys starting right away, you would hope that the Houston guy would start right away. So
if the Raiders take a guy, they're probably starting right away. Panthers, I don't think have a quarterback on the roster at this point. They have spots that have a spot that can start right away. Falcons could be a start right away. That's obviously much more up in the air.
That would be a little more up in the air, yeah.
Well, we'll talk about that in much greater detail as we go through the offseason. We're talking about free agency, the draft, combine, best ball, so on and so forth. We're glad Patrick Kerrane is back in the United States of America. We're glad Kyle Dvorchak's haircut is going well. We're glad Denny keeps going on the road. And so we'll be back next week. Denny will be back. Kerrane will be back. Kyle will be back. Lawrence will be around. So for Pat, Kyle, I'm the other Pat. Thanks for listening. We'll be back later.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and Rotoworld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from Rotoworld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.